Hi everyone, this is John Dickinson for Boris FX, and in this short breakdown I'm going to be walking you through how I created this look using Boris FX Sapphire. So go ahead, download the project and follow along. Okay, so if you have downloaded the After Effects project, just open that up and this is what you'll see on your screen. There's only one composition, this hot smeared text. I've actually rendered out a proxy. If I turn that on, you can see that just allows me to get a nice fast preview, but that isn't included in the download. So I'll just turn that off. And let's start right at the bottom here with backgrounds. Just going to select that and going to solo that by clicking on the solo button. And this is a simple black solid. Nothing to really talk about here, but it will make sense as to why I've put this in a moment. If I just toggle transparency grid, move that out of the way, you can see that is indeed a black solid. So I'll toggle that again and just turn that off for a moment and just hide it. Okay, next let's take a look at S Effect. So I'm going to solo that. And you can see here that we actually have the Sapphire text as a matte for this. So I'm just going to click on Toggle Switches and Modes. And notice how S Effect is using an alpha track matte, and it's using the Sapphire layer as a matte. So let's start by choosing no track matte, and now we're seeing just the S Effect layer. So up in the Effect Controls panel, let's make myself a little bit more space here. I'm going to click on Edit Effect. Now if you're using Sapphire Effect and the Effect Builder is a really good place to start. And this is where I actually started building this look. And the reason I use Sapphire Effect Builder to start is because I can access all of the Sapphire presets all in one place. If I come up here and choose Insert Node from Preset, that opens up the preset browser. And here I can preview all of the presets across all of the Sapphire effects in one place. And that's really important because there are a lot of presets and they are a really good place to start. Going to cancel that. And the other main reason I like to start with the Sapphire Builder is because I can experiment with effects really quickly. And I knew that when I was building this look, I wanted to start with Ultra Zap. Up until this point, I hadn't actually used Sapphire Ultra Zap inside of Sapphire Builder. And this fiery or hot smeared text is the result of me experimenting with Ultra Zap inside Builder. So the first effect I applied was Ultra Zap, and for this I did actually use a preset. Let's actually come up to Node again and choose Insert Node from Preset. And I'm going to type in Zap, double click Ultra Zap, and I use one of the presets that I created, this one here, Swamp Thing. So this was my starting point. So just clicking Load, and that loads that into here. And just coming over and making a few adjustments on the right-hand side in the selection parameters. Following Ultra Zap, I applied Warp Bubble. And just clicking back here again, Ultra Zap is obviously animated. It has its own auto animation. And Warp Bubble does have its own auto animation, but you can see I've actually made A speed X and A speed Y 0. And also B speed X and speed Y 0. So we're getting all of the movement from the Ultra Zap. So I applied one level of Warp Bubble and then I applied a second level of Warp Bubble. So we're warping the Ultra Zap two different ways. And after that, Sapphire Monochrome. Now of course we're here in After Effects with this particular project, but Sapphire can be used in multiple different hosts. And the Sapphire Builder becomes even more important, say if you're using Avid, because you can apply multiple effects and stack them together to create various looks, which is something that's more difficult in Avid than it is in After Effects. I could have created this look directly in After Effects, but as I mentioned, I like to start in Sapphire Builder. And in the end, I didn't really get a complicated stack of different effects, and I'm not using the matte ports and I'm not using the background or mask. So it is fairly simple, but this was my starting point. I'm just going to cancel out of here. Let me just make this full frame and cancel. So we've got this sort of swirling, sort of pulsating, distorted ultra zap. And you can see there's lots of detail in there as well. Which comes from the ultra zap. Now above that we have some sapphire text. Let me just solo that and turn off the effects and toggle transparency again. So there's sapphire text. Just double click that and you can see that I've actually tracked that out a little bit to 15. Let's turn on this layer again. And you can see there is transparency there as well. So the sapphire text is being used as a matte for S-Effect. So I'm going to come down to the S-Effect layer and choose Alpha Matte Sapphire. And with the text selected, you can see I've applied the Ultra Zap and the Warp Bubble effects. So let's turn on Ultra Zap. I actually might just turn off the track matte for now so we can see a little more clearly, like that. Okay, so Ultra Zap in After Effects has the added mode, which is Ultra Zap AE Path. So with that chosen, I'm able to have my Ultra Zap follow along the edges of my After Effects text, which is really valuable. So there's a little bit of animation in the Ultra Zap, a little bit of auto animation. We're not really interested in the bolts as lightning bolts because they're being warped by, again, warp bubble. So if I just turn that on, you can see we get a kind of turbulent noise look. And remember, this is only being used as a matte for S-Effect. So I'll turn on S-Effect again and come down and choose Alpha Matte Sapphire. So here's the result so far. And you can see we're getting this really interesting, almost liquid-like look with the combination of Ultra Zap and Warp Bubbles. Now above that we have an adjustment layer with Sapphire Distort Blur. And I really love Sapphire Distort Blur. It gives these really lovely ghostly streaks. And one of my favorite features is this rotate blur direction. That's what gives us this sort of curvature. If I bring that back down to 0, still gives this really interesting distortion, but with this rotate blur, starts to add that curvature, which I really like. I'm going to bring it back to where I was, 150. And notice how the adjustment layer has completely removed all of the detail from the layers below. Now, in order to get that back, just notice here, if I click on Toggle Transparency Grid, we don't actually have a background. So in order for that adjustment layer to work correctly with the screen blend mode, I need to have a background. So that's where this black background comes in. And now you can see we're getting the combination of the distort blur and the other effects below. Turn that on and off. We're getting these streaks on top, giving us another layer of detail. Now above that is another Sapphire text layer. And this one has Ultra Zap and Warp Bubble. I'm going to turn off the Warp Bubble first. Now for Ultra Zap, I just come down and press U twice just to reveal the change parameters. For bolt structure, I have 3 bolts. You can see each of the letters has 3 bolts, and it's wrapping around the letters because in After Effects I have the Ultra Zap AE Path mode selected. And this is one of the great benefits of using Ultra Zap inside of After Effects. And that's followed by Warp Bubble just to add a little bit of turbulence to those strokes. Above that we have another S-Effect layer. Okay, so this one, I just turn the other ones off. This one is a duplicate of the bottom S-Effect. It doesn't have the monochrome in there, and you can see I've just got some warm colors there in Ultra Zap. And I'm using the same Sapphire text as a matte. And if I just turn these back on. And what this one is doing is just reintroducing some of these nice clean sharp edges of the text. And apart from being a different color, you can see it's actually exactly the same as the effects created using S-Effect and Warp Bubble in this layer below. So it's adding an extra layer of detail plus these sharp edges. And you can see as the fill's moving around, it's revealing different parts of the letters. Above that, we have yet another Sapphire text layer. And you can see when I select it, there's a mask applied. Let's just turn that one on. This is just simple black text with a soft mask. Just going to hit the F key to reveal the feather. And there's a feather on the y-axis, just to feather it out a little bit on the top. Above that, we have an adjustment layer with Sapphire Gamma. Just a slight tweak to the gamma. You can see that's now 1.3. This will just brighten things up a little bit. And above that, we have another adjustment layer, this time with Ultra Glow. And since Ultra Glow's inclusion in Sapphire, it's quickly become my #1 go-to glow. Watch how this really changes this. Boom, really gives it that beautiful soft glow. And one of the reasons for that is because we have two different colors. We've got the primary glow, which is this pale orange. We've also got this big soft, see it's set to 285, afterglow with this deep red. Makes such a big difference to this. On top of that, we have some more Sapphire text. This one also has Ultra Zap applied. But for this one, you can see I haven't used Warp Bubble. Just used a single primary bolt with a bolt width of 8 and a taper at both ends. Because obviously readability is important as well. Now above that, we have probably the most important effect also applied to an adjustment layer, which is Sapphire Distort. Now let's just take a quick look at this effect. For the lens, I'm using S-Effect. This is layer 12, this one down here. Remember, this has Ultra Zap and Warp Bubble applied. And it's also being used for the matte. Let's turn this on. And this is what's going to give that really beautiful smearing effect. See how that's smearing up through the text. I'll turn both of these off. So that's the effect without either the matte or the lens. Here I'll add S-Effect as the lens and also add it as the matte. So the combination of the two really helps. We just turn lens off. Still looks pretty nice. I like that look as well. But as I was experimenting, I chose both of them. And I found that using S-Effect for the lens just restricts that a little bit and just makes it not so full on. It's really lovely there, how that's smearing down there. And one thing to notice, because I'm using the S-Effect layer with effects applied, we have to be sure to choose effects and masks. Otherwise, S-Distort won't recognize the effects applied to the S-Effect layer. Okay, so the last layer is Sapphire Bokeh Lights. This is also an adjustment layer. And this is my favorite little particle effect for Sapphire, which doesn't actually include a particle generator currently. But I can make it appear like they're particles with Sapphire Bokeh Lights using the Use Source Color option. You can see I've got that set to 1. If I bring that down to 0, then that will apply the bokeh lights to the entire frame. But by using the source color, which is, because this is an adjustment layer, is all the layers below, it's going to isolate the bokeh lights just to the colors of those layers below. And if I just do a full frame preview, you can see they're isolated to this area around the text. And with the bokeh lights drift options, they kind of look like embers floating around this hot, fiery text. Okay, so one last thing I want to mention is how to change the text in a setup like this. Normally when I'm working with text, what I like to do is create my text and then pre-compose it, and then use that in the main comp. So then when I want to change the text, I simply change it in the pre-comp and it will update in all the duplicates of that text. But in this case, that wasn't going to work because Ultra Zap has been applied to a number of these text layers. And in order to use this mode, Ultra Zap AE Path, I have to apply it to the text and not to pre-composed text. Now, one way I can make it easier to change this text is to use a simple expression. If I select all of the text just by control clicking, and this one too, come up to my search bar and type in source. That's going to reveal the source text parameter. And what I want to do is link the source text of the top layers down to this bottom one. I can do that quickly just using the property pick whip. Bring that down to source text for each one. And source text. So now the source text is linked up. So I should be able to just change the bottom text just by double clicking up in Fire. And there we go. So that's updated. Keep in mind though that source text doesn't recognize any kerning that you've got in there. So if you've kerned the text out, you want to set up your bottom layer and then copy and paste it onto these layers. But it is more efficient if you're going to duplicate the layer a lot of times and not use the pre-compose method to set up your initial text with all of its kerning and positioning, and then pick whipping the source text to the master is going to work as expected. And once again, here's the final result. And remember, I created this look purely through experimentation just by applying UltraZap and seeing what I could create by adding other Sapphire effects. So why not go ahead now and see if you can make this look even better. Try adjusting the different settings, add different Sapphire effects. If you don't have Sapphire, be sure to download a demo from borisfx.com, where you can also find more Sapphire tutorials.